Good evening, TheoTrade. This is Corey Rosenblum, and you're watching the Theo, not the video, for the 2nd of May here in 2023. And we got some fireworks in today's session. Headline news right here in TheoTrade. 2% off in the Russell. Other markets, other indices that is, are off about 1%. But the big market that moved today was crude. Crude oil was down 5.5%. Let's take a quick look at each of them. Now, in tonight's video, we'll keep this logic about the reward pathway, which is currently playing against that 4,200, and the risk pathway, which is another push to 4,400. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Also, Apple earnings, much to go over just in tonight's video. But starting with the S&P, it has a sell swing or sell side put or bear positioning up against 4,200 only because of the probability of the last few times we've hit that number or come close to it and had the market sell off, as opposed to breaking out, which occurred one time, and that pushed the market in a risk breakout pathway from 4,200 up to 44. That's your S&P. Other than that, the market has hit or come close to hitting and then traded back down for the next swing. On the NASDAQ, not much different. The level that it's trading up against is just shy of that 13,500. A little bit shy of that, again, bear or sell side potential from those points. And the market did break and trade back down. So this is just looking at the charts and mitigating risk. The Dow is in a little bit tighter of a trading range, and the Russell is the weakest. Compare and contrast. The S&P is up at the top of its trading range, and that's just going to be a little box, volatility box, as Don would say. That's about 4,200, and the bottom is just about 3,750, which makes the mid about 4,000. That is your volatility box. And in the NASDAQ, it's closer to the top of its volatility box. Dow is closer to the top of its volatility box, but the Russell is closer to the bottom. If you think about its volatility box, that's about 1950 and roughly 1700 for the Russell. So my thought would be the following. If we do get a sell swing from the S&P to the downside, it's just going to be another of a normal, pretty typical, if we call them typical, bear sell swings in price. But that's going to take the Russell to new lows, potentially under 1650. Now that is a bigger picture play. And we'll have a lot of earnings, a lot of news, we'll have the Fed, a lot of things coming up that will dictate whether or not we get the breakout into the risk or we get the reward with those puts playing and paying across the markets. Of interest, speaking of volatility boxes, we have crude oil, which is forming a volatility box about 82, and it's all the way back to the bottom, which is near 72. So see what could happen when the market gets into a reward pathway to the downside versus a risk pathway to the upside. Crude was down 5% in today's session, and that's in large part, lots of reasons, but I believe the general economy is starting to price in a potential recession, and that inflation is going down, and these jobs and economic numbers, GDP, and other things are potentially coming in a little softer than expected, and that does paint a picture of bearishness on the horizon. Another way to look at that is the TLT, which is your 10-year Treasury, or the 20-year Treasury note. IEF is your 10 to 7 year, and it is also in a volatility box. But the bond market was up 2.5% today, so that's something to be watching closely, which is, this is your inflation gauge. If assets or money or skittish investors begin to rotate strongly into the bond market, they're going to rotate out of the equity market, and as a consequence, possibly out of crude as well. They could easily rotate back into gold, which itself was up about 2%, just shy of 2% in today's session. So those are things we'll be keeping a watch on throughout the rest of the week. As you know, we have a very, very big announcement coming up on Wednesday. It's the Fed. It's the Fed. And we know what they're going to do. We just don't know what they're going to say. And the other thing outside of that is Apple. So Apple will have earnings after the Fed day. So this can be a volatile week. Nevertheless, the Fed is going to report its decision, and we expect that decision to be a raise in interest rates. What are the odds on that? The odds would favor actually 85%. Now that's come down a little bit. The odds were 75 not too long ago, 93% just a day ago, and the odds have slipped a little bit. One reason they slipped a little bit is because of the weakness in financials. Down 2%. That's what took down the Russell in large part. Just to visualize that, there is your Russell on the heat map right there. And it's exposed to lots of financial stocks, also energy stocks. Those were two of the weakest sectors in today's session. Energy down 4%, crude down 5%, financials in general off 2%. In large part because of the KRE regional banks. And I won't go through each of them, but Zion Bank would be one example. Other examples are there too. There is a threat of contagion roiling through other regional banks. So First Republic, FRC, is off the table. It's done. It is taken over. JP Morgan has purchased that, the assets that remained. And see, it had a stability but then broke. This one is off the charts. But so might other banks. And that's pulling down the KRE. And that's what a statement came out today. And the statement was, we believe you, Chair Powell, should back away from raising interest rates like you say you're going to do. That is probably not going to happen, which means we'll know in about 24 hours or less. But the Fed is expected to raise those interest rates the final time being from the current target rate. So think about it, that is 4.75. They'll raise that 4.75 to 5%. And if you go out in the future here, you'll see that that is most likely the terminal, meaning the end of the rate hike cycles. There is a 15% chance that they do not raise rates. And the better in us, the better. If you want to take that side of the market, by all means. But I'll take the 85% that they will raise rates. They'll continue with their campaign to squash inflation. We already see inflation coming down. And that is going to affect the broader economy. It already has. So probably going to see that rate hike unless something major happens. Major would be a down move in Wednesday's session before the Fed of a 3 or 4 or 5% sell-off in the equity futures that are concentrated in the financials. The Fed will be respective or responsive to that. So outside of financials, outside of the Fed, and outside of the market potentially doing a sell swing, we still have stocks that have earnings, and just to name a few of them, today's session saw Pfizer. Starbucks has earnings after the bell. It has made a new 52-week high. Simon Property Groups and AMD and Ford, they had earnings or will have earnings as we speak. In fact, let's take a quick look to see what these stocks have done. This is how we look at earnings just on a quick basis. So we'll put this, we'll look at the after hours on equities, show extended trading session, and Starbucks is unchanged mostly. Other than that, Simon Property Group, a little bit unchanged. It's a little bit up. AMD, Advanced Micro, is, that's the first one to take a hit. That's 90 down to 86. Its expected move, just noting quickly, it's about $6 up or down. That's potentially being in play. And finally, Ford had its earnings. It's roughly unchanged. Tomorrow will be Kraft Heinz Foods, Exelon, CVS, which has been under a lot of pressure on the big picture. CVS will report tomorrow's session before the close. And then Emerson. And the one we'll be watching will be Qualcomm. And later in the week, Apple. Not to make light of other stocks reporting earnings, but Apple will be a stock we'll all be watching here in Theo and across the markets. So much going on and other financial reports coming up as well. Please be careful. Please be safe. Guard your positions. Have your risk mitigated or hedge with your options or your spreads. And if you're using stocks or unmitigated risk, be sure to have some stop losses or to have a risk management plan in the event something unexpected takes place. So watch your headlines, watch your news, and all the things that take place just in the next few potentially volatile trading sessions. As always, be careful and safe. This is Corey Rosenblum with tonight's Theo video update for May 2nd, 2023.